Welcome to the Maker's Playbook, the podcast where we talk all about what it's really like to make a living from the things you make. I'm your host, Rebecca Ikes Kara. This week on the Maker's Playbook, I'm talking to Kara Leigh Ford. Even though Kara studied art at university, it wasn't until she was searching for inspiration outside of her draining day job that she touched clay. And once again, like we all say, she was hooked from the start. In this episode, we talk about the realities of transitioning from a full-time job to being a full-time potter, including auditioning for the Great Pottery Throwdown. We also discuss the huge role our mindsets play in being able to succeed as entrepreneurs, but also the tactical realities of charging what your work is actually worth. In fact, as Kara mentions, if you're actually charging what your work is worth, you then need to make sure the rest of your brand experience, the look of your website, the quality of your photos, everything needs to line up with that same value. So before we dig in, I wanted to remind you guys that if you struggle getting good photos of your work, if it takes you way too many hours or days for that matter to photograph pieces for a shop update, and you just can't seem to get your favorite glaze color to look the same in photos as in real life, then check out the show notes for a link to my free 3-step cheat sheet to get started taking better photos faster. I promise that even though this handy little PDF will only take you 5 minutes to read and implement, it will be the foundation for speeding up the entire photo taking process. But enough about photography for now. We have an amazing episode with Kara Leigh Ford, and I think that actually my favorite part, the part where Kara reminds me of why art is actually essential, even during COVID, well, that part doesn't come up in conversation almost until the end. So let's get to it, shall we? Hello, Kara. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Rebecca. So nice to chat to you.
I'm so excited to have you on. For those that don't know, which seems strange to me because I feel like when I've told people that you and I were chatting, you were Instagram famous. But for those that don't know, give us the 3,000 foot view. How did you get to today? What's the background?
Okay.
Who's Kara?
Do you want the long story or do you want the short story?
If you were born in the evening.
Yeah, it is quite a journey, I have to say.
I think that's the interesting thing, at least for me and for everyone, is very seldom do I hear from someone, I went to university and I studied ceramics and then I started my business. Like, oh, that's lovely. How'd that work?
Okay, I'll try and keep it as condensed as I can. I've been a potter for 5 years, coming up 6 now, and I didn't start out being a potter. I did go to art college, in fact. I've always been quite creative. So when I was a kid, I wasn't very academic. I'm actually dyslexic as well, so struggled with reading and arithmetic and maths. And I only really felt completely comfortable if I was making something or drawing something or acting in a play or something like that. So basically, the creativity has been there for me right from the very beginning. So I did go to art college because that was really the only thing that I thought I would ever want to do is to just continue to study art.
Yeah.
And at that point, when I was 18 when I went to art college, I never touched clay. We didn't have access to it in my school. I was only ever doing things like painting and drawing. I'd never done any sculpture or anything like that. It wasn't until I actually left university. So I'd already done 3 years, 1 year at like a foundation year, and then another 3 years doing fine art and theatre studies, in fact.
Huh.
Yeah, random. And it wasn't until after I left university and I got an office job that I thought, wow, this is rubbish. I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. I mean, it was like customer service.
Yeah.
No shade on anyone who works in customer service. It's a hard job and it definitely wasn't for me. And yeah, I just thought I need to do something in the evenings to keep me sane. So I decided to look up my local further education college who did evening classes. found ceramics. I was just like, oh yeah, that would be cool. I'll give that a go. Went along and literally, I know so many potters say this, but it was like love at first touch with
Yep.
clay. I was like, where has this been my whole life? Oh my gosh, I just fell in love. It was amazing. And yeah, 12 years later,
just skipping a little.
yeah. So I worked in corporate jobs for 10 years. So I worked in marketing, which even though I didn't really enjoy most of, actually was really quite helpful when it came to setting up my own business and working out how to actually reach people and talk about my work and how to frame it
Yeah.
publicly in communications and stuff, because they don't teach you that at art college.
No, they do not.
Even though I worked in this marketing job, which I didn't really enjoy, it was actually very useful in the end. But it took 10 years of slogging away at that corporate ladder and looking around me going, then there has to be more to life than this. I didn't do 4 years study to just not be creative, even though marketing is quite creative. It's creative in a different way. It's not the same muscle as actually physically making things with your hands and producing things that tangible things that you can feel or see, and like pottery. And so I was at a bit of a low point in my career, and I just like, no, I can't do this forever. I've got to make a plan. So I started to think about maybe pottery being a full-time gig at some point. I didn't really have a 10-year countdown or anything like that.
Sure.
But then a friend of mine, one of my husband's best friends, my husband's in a band, and he played with a friend of his called Alex. They were in a band for 10 years. And Alex actually got diagnosed with a brain tumor at the age of 30.
Gosh.
And yeah, that was like a huge wake up call for all of us, really. Our little friendship group, we hung out together, all the wags, the wives and girlfriends of the band members. Yeah, and it was just like, holy shit, Alex, he's fighting for his life, and I'm healthy, and I'm not like taking life by the horns. I'm not doing my best to actually just take a chance on what I actually love doing, which is being creative. And Alex was always really supportive to me. He was always like, Car, brilliant, you should just do it. Just stop messing around. Just come on, quit your job, just do it.
No big deal.
Yeah. And he was just so instrumental, really. And he actually lost his battle to cancer. And that, again, was just like something just I had to make a change in my life, because he didn't get the chance to follow his dreams. So I owed it to him to follow mine. And alongside that, there's a little program here in the UK, I don't know if you've heard of it, called the Great Pottery Throwdown.
Oh, just slightly. We may have only just watched it last night.
Oh my God. Are you guys on the first series? Have you got
Oh no, we're finally now on season 3, but the first 2 series. So now it's on I'm completely digressing here for the sake of levity. Now it's all on whatever HBO service.
Yep.
But before, when it first came out, and of course everyone in the pottery world here, even in the US, was still talking about it. So we were all like stalking YouTube trying to find what person had uploaded the most recent episodes.
Oh, awesome. Well, yeah, I'm so glad you guys have that now, because it'll make so much more sense to you when I'm when I'm talking about it. Because otherwise it would be really hard to describe. So I actually auditioned for the first season. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
First season of the Great Pottery Throwdown. My local pottery supply store, they put up a poster looking for people to audition.
Okay.
And you basically had to fill in a form, send off some pictures of your work, and then someone would get in contact with you if you were one of the ones that they wanted to see.
Yeah.
And everything was happening with Alex just at that time, and he was getting sicker. And I just thought, you know what? Sod it. I'm gonna give this a go. What's the worst that can happen is that I just don't hear back. And
Sure.
the next day, I got a phone call from the production company saying, "Hey, Cara, would you like to come to London for an audition?" And I was like, okay. Sure. Holy shit. I had to literally get some of my pottery together and call in sick as well to my boss.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
literally had no notice. Go up to London, met a whole bunch of other people and started going through the casting process. And I got down to the last 20 people.
Stop. Oh
Yeah.
my God. This is so much fun.
Nuts. And I just couldn't believe it. There was 500 or so applicants. It wasn't a big show back then, so no one knew of it really. And there weren't really that many potters. We're talking kind of 7 years ago. Instagram was still building at that point. It wasn't a big thing. There wasn't
Right.
yeah. There wasn't a whole load of us out there like there are now. And yeah, so I got through to the final 20, but I'm going to say luckily for me, I didn't get through because I couldn't do the whole camera in my face, answering questions and throwing a pot at the same time. Those people, they have special skill to be able to do that. It's really, really hard.
Which is ironic coming from the girl who I know records videos and teaches online as part of her living. Okay,
Well,
sure. Okay.
That's really kind, but I've had an additional 7 years practice since then. So
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't get onto the show, but what it did give me was an insight into that there were other people in the world that were doing it, that were making a full-time living from pottery. So everyone that I was in that audition room with, they were all potters in some form or another, whether there was a lady who ran her own paint your own pottery shop. There was a guy he was an artist in residence at a private school. There was another lady who ran courses. There was another guy who was a sculptor. And I was just in awe of these people. I'd never met real life proper potters before, ever. Apart from the pottery teacher who was teaching me on my evening class, but she was the only one.
Right.
And so I was just like, wow, you can actually do this as a job. That's amazing. And they were always really confused when, I asked them so what do you do? And they were like, I make pottery for a living. And I was like, really? And they were like, uh-huh.
You're auditioning for the Great Pottery
Yeah.
Show.
Yeah. But I was the only one in my audition round who wasn't doing that. I had another full-time job that wasn't pottery.
Right.
That just set the wheels going for me. And I was just like, do you know what? If I got through that far, someone must have saw something in me that they must have thought, actually, her work is all right. Maybe I can do this. So after a lot of budget spreadsheets,
real talk.
Yeah, chatting to my husband and my friends and family, all of whom I didn't give enough credit to. I thought that they would think I was completely barking mad and tell me to stop being ridiculous. But none of them did that. Everyone was really supportive and said, Cara, we're going to support you 100%. You can do this. Yeah, do it. And so I handed in my notice for my day job, and that was a Friday, and then started working on a Monday as a potter.
And that was 5 years ago.
Well, that was when was it? Oh, it's 2015 that I started being a potter.
Amazing. I have so many questions about the pottery throwdown I want to ask you, but I'm not going to because I'm going to try and stay focused.
Sure.
And I know respecting everyone's time and your time and not diving down just a whole TV production conversation for an hour.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, there's so many questions. But I mean, it's fascinating because it's not like you had the job in marketing with this grandiose plan of, oh, I'm going to learn this from this company and then apply that to my own, the long game of, I'm going to start this business, so therefore I'm going to learn from this other company for a while and then switch. That doesn't sound like that was part of the plan by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, it really wasn't. It was pure luck that I ended up in marketing. So I started out in customer services in a shoe company, and it was a nice company to work for. There was nothing wrong with it. It was just, it wasn't right for me.
Sure.
They were looking for a marketing assistant, and I was like, oh, that's creative. I'll see what that's like. So I just applied and I got that job. And then I worked up the ranks in marketing, became brand manager. And it just so happened that everything I learnt on the job literally was just so invaluable. And I do, at the time, I was hating it. And I really just, that Sunday night dread when I knew I had to go back into work was just like, oh my God, I really don't think I can do this. And like I said, not that it was a bad job. It was a great job for anyone else who wanted to work in marketing. It would have been
Right.
a really lovely job, but it just wasn't, I wasn't suited to it. It just wasn't what I wanted to do. But it really set me up in good stead for running my own business. That's for sure.
It's funny how that works because in university, my bachelor's is in graphic design.
Oh my
I've
gosh.
never I had the internship, I had all the stuff and all of the paperwork, all the things you were
Mhm.
supposed to do to get the job. But I happened to graduate in 2009. And gee, I don't know what happened in 2009. The economy collapsed, no one was hiring. But studying that put me in such a good position for starting my own business because I
Absolutely.
was lucky enough to have interned with a national nonprofit who was going through a massive rebrand. They were changing their
Wow.
name, they were changing everything. And so you really understood the importance of what that does for a cause when it comes to a nonprofit, for gaining an
Yeah.
audience, for all that kind of stuff.
Building a brand from the bottom up. That's
Hmm.
invaluable. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So I want to talk a little bit more about that business side because I think that's for any of us, obviously the through line for all of us is you touch mud, the wheel starts spinning and you're in. That's a given, right?
Yeah.
But then to actually make a living of this takes so much more. I think everyone dreams of I'm just going to make what I love to make and put it out in the world and
Yeah.
somehow pay my bills at the same time. That's just going to happen. Before diving into the real life right now of how that business works, I want to take a step back because you mentioned deciding to leave that job
Mm.
and having those conversations and looking at those budget spreadsheets. That transition, it sounded to me, and correct me if I was wrong, but that was quite abrupt. It wasn't like you guys were, okay, I'm going to stick out this job for the next year and squirrel away a savings to then quit at the new year and start a business kind of thing. It was more immediate. So, what was that transition like?
Yeah, I guess I probably portrayed it as a slightly more immediate than it actually was. It probably was around 6 to 9 months before, from the kind of the embryonic idea in my head of okay,
Hmm.
I think this can work, to actually then handing in my notice. It was probably about 9 to 6 months. And during that time, I'd had a steady job for 10 years. I had some savings. My husband and I, we rented a very cheap house. The area that we lived in was just like really unusually cheap for
Hmm.
being around the Bath area because Bath is notoriously expensive.
Sure.
But we actually rented a little cottage from a farmer who hadn't put the rent up for about 50 years.
Oh,
So
God.
the cottage was like, it was really dilapidated, and it was like the carpets needed to be replaced, and the central heating didn't really work, and there was loads wrong with the house, but it was super cheap. So we didn't have a lot of outgoings. I had no debt apart from my student loan, but that doesn't really count.
For those of us in the US, I'm not even gonna touch that subject with my
Yeah.
European friends.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Sorry about that, guys. I was one of the lucky ones that my student loan was like, I don't know, £3,000 a year, something like that. And my family, I come from like a low income background, so my tuition fees were actually paid for. And I had a grant as well because when you're like, if you were like first in your family to go to university here, we're talking 15 years ago now. So things have
Right.
moved on a little bit, and tuition fees are much higher than they were when I went to university. They're like 3 times higher. But yeah, so my student loan wasn't a thing. It just, they take the money from your payment like that you get from your employer, and when you're self-employed, that just stops. So it's not like they're going to come around and like kneecap you for your student loan. And yeah, we just had very very low outgoings. My husband had like his job, he wasn't at that time, he was earning okay. It wasn't like amazing, it was probably pretty average income. But it was enough because we had low outgoings and we had cheap rent and we didn't have any debt. It was enough that if we were careful, we didn't go on any lavish holidays, we didn't buy any cars or need to do anything else interesting, then we could get by on his salary and my savings for at least a year, 18 months. And by that point, I was aiming that my business would be at least bringing in something. So I contribute something to the bills. So, yeah, in a very privileged position that I had a partner, husband that was prepared to do that for me, to just make sure that we paid the rent for that initial setup period. But yeah, just not having a lot of outgoings really did help.
Sure. Yeah. Living under your means, basically, rather than.
Exactly. And we still went on holiday, but we'd go camping or we'd go on a really cheap last minute deal. Like it wasn't like we ate beans and rice for that year.
Right.
It was, when I look back at it, it was a lovely time. I actually look back really fondly on that time. So, yeah.
So thinking of that transition, you had the goal of, okay, in a year, 18 months, the business is going to at least be over breaking even, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
because it's very common. I would say everybody has probably heard the phrase in some way or another that most small businesses in the first, 3 years, I think the statistic is, you're not going to make a profit in the first 3 years, and then 5 years. And there's all these markers that we have to
Yeah.
get to that, oh, you've made it past that 5 year hurdle when most people go out of business, or, oh, you've made it past 10
Yeah.
and whatnot. So did you hit at 12 months or 18 months, or what's that progression look like?
Oh, so I certainly wasn't making any profit for the first, I'd even say maybe in my third year, I finally was coming up to making some profit. And even then, it was quite minimal. It was like it wasn't going to be, I don't know.
Elon Musk.
Yeah, it was very, very minimal profit. And
Sure.
actually in 2018, so even that was the year that I built my new studio. So all of that, any profit that I made went straight
Sure.
back into my new studio. So still wasn't really making any money.
Yeah, it's the kind of profit that you make that really just actually funnels the things you've wanted to then do.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So that enabled me to build this bigger studio that I'm sat in talking to you from now. It enabled me to buy a second bigger kiln, and it enabled me to take on a studio assistant as well for 1 day a week. So all of that profit, kind of in inverted commas, just went straight back into my business. And it's only really now, what I'm in my 6th year, that I am actually seeing any real financial stability from my business. It's only now that I can, my husband's roles have actually reversed now. So it's funny that now my husband actually lost his job at the beginning of this year.
Okay.
Due to COVID, but he was quite happy about that. He had, like me, worked in a job in a very corporate world, which just wasn't suited to him for a very, very long time. He tried to bend himself into being something that he wasn't. And then when he got made redundant in the beginning of this year, it was like, oh, yeah, no, it's time for you to just move on from this career. And now I am the one who is paying the rent and paying all the bills. And I'm saying I'm allowing him. I'm not allowing him to do anything. He is allowing himself some time to find what he really, really wants to do rather than jump back into another corporate role, which doesn't suit him. He's taking some time out to work out what he wants to do as a career, which is really lovely. It feels like it's evening back out. I'm paying back the debt.
Well, it's coming full circle, right? It's
Exactly.
actually, this is how partnership works. This is,
Yes.
hey, you helped me do what I was dreaming of, and now we get to do that again.
Yeah, which feels so good. And so I'm so thrilled to be able to do that for him because he enabled me to get where I am. So yeah.
I'm in a similar position now, and it's interesting, at least to me, and I'm curious how you're feeling about. We've built these businesses. We know they're strong. We're in a place where it's like, okay, I know what I'm doing. Each year has proven that you're able to grow something, and you're still paying the bills. And I've never been destitute or anything like that.
Yeah.
But
Hmm.
somehow, then being the person who is the one who is providing, it shifts something, at least from, it's a bigger deal in some ways, even though it really hasn't changed.
Yeah.
But when there isn't that safety net to fall back on,
Yeah.
and my brain goes in a million different directions with that, because I think it's that conversation around our mindset around risk, and that feeling that somehow working for someone else is more secure.
Hmm.
But
It's really not.
it's exactly,
Yeah.
that's the thing, isn't it? Because when you're working for someone else, you actually have no idea of the health of the business.
Yeah.
Whereas I can pull up my profit and loss sheet right now and
Yeah.
tell you, like, okay, so if COVID keeps going,
Yeah.
or if the community studio shuts down again, or XYZ, if this is how sales go, for better or for worse, this is the month where things go in the red, or this is
Yeah.
like, it's almost too much information.
Yeah. Yeah. I think do you know what? I think it feels really good. I feel so good about where my business is at the moment. Like, I'm still not making a shit ton of money. But I feel like, so at the beginning of the year, when we decided that Thomas, my husband Tom, wouldn't get another job straight away, it was almost like a little experiment that we decided to do. It was like, okay, we'll just try this for a while.
Yeah,
And if it doesn't work, if it mean, if we end up struggling, if we can't pay our mortgage, or we're struggling to feed ourselves, then he will just go and get another job, and that's cool. And we were both fine with that, and we both really had really open conversations about that. And he was like, well, how would you feel if this happened? And I'd be like, how would you feel if that happened?
you're the one that has to go get the other job.
Yeah, exactly. And he was, do you know what, I'm totally okay with that. And if it does happen, then that's cool. And we tried it. At least we tried it.
Mhm.
And 9 months later, we've managed it. We are fine.
We're recording this in 2020 and you're still fine. That's a big
Yeah.
deal.
We've survived. And it was freaking hard at the beginning. There was moments when the UK went first into lockdown here in March. That was a scary moment for me. Was I was in tears for most days, I would say, for that first few weeks, just because
Yeah,
I was so anxious about what the hell's going to happen. I can't teach people now. And not that I did many craft markets anyway, but I
right.
certainly couldn't do them then. And I had so many plans. And, I was writing a course about wholesale, how to sell your work to shops and galleries. And then all the shops and galleries had to shut. And I just spent 6 months working on this course that I was like, oh, great. That's a shitter.
Right. Which,
um,
though, the course is still live. I'm in the middle of it. I
yep.
think it's still going to be incredibly, incredibly. And shops still exist. They're pivoting themselves. They're, even for the shops that I sell to, they're sure maybe there's not as many people in their retail store, but they're having to shift everything online
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
still
exactly.
need inventory for that online sale.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
yeah, and I had to definitely shift my mindset for this year. And I think it was a really great Instagrammer who I follow called Kate Ferris. She's
Okay.
Simple in Season. I don't know if you've ever come across her, but she's fantastic. She's
I
a
will link her in the show notes.
Oh, definitely. She's a small business coach, and she's got so much wisdom. She really is amazing. She actually said if we all just shift our mindsets from thriving to survival, then we'll all feel a lot more comfortable right now, and the world is going to feel a lot less scary if we just shift that mindset. And that's what I did, and it really did help me to go, okay, no, I'm just going to all I need to do this year is survive rather than thrive and put in place all the huge, big plans I had. I'm just going to rein it back, I'm going to just make sure that my business is healthy, it's ticking over. I had multiple conversations with people about the wholesale course, whether I should still continue to do it or not. And one of the ladies who helped me create the course, Emma Bell, she owned a really lovely gallery down in Dorset for 15 years. She is a really great friend of mine, and she gave me a bit of a pep talk and said, Cara, this isn't the end of galleries. This isn't the end of shops. This is a blip. And the strong ones are going to come back even stronger for it. They are, like you said, Rebecca, they're going to pivot. They are going to streamline their businesses. They are going to think outside the box. And that is what good businesses do, is when something like this comes along, they don't just hold their hands up and say, okay, well, we had a nice time. Let's just end it there. We're going to go and all work for the man now. They will face the difficulties head on, and they'll go, right, okay, how can I make my business navigate this storm? How can I survive this? Yeah. And yeah, I'm in a much better place mentally now than I was at the beginning of March. And yeah, I've forgotten what the question was, Rebecca.
No worries. It's wonderful because I think it speaks, though, so much to what an exercise in our mindset, being self-employed, starting your own business. Like, there's so much around managing your brain, managing your own mind with that, I think.
Yes.
When it comes to, even just as I was jotting down notes and thoughts as you were speaking, like risk tolerance around like your husband and yours risk tolerance for being okay with saying, okay, we're going to use this as an experiment, and if it starts to go south, then we change. My problem for myself is so often, if I see something start to go south, I immediately try and course correct, which isn't necessarily helpful, because it's okay, look, you've never been homeless, you've never been in massive credit card debt, you've been self-employed for 10 years. Knock it off, stay the course.
Yeah.
Just keep swimming. Yeah. You don't need to. We all needed a good hard cry at the beginning of COVID, and maybe still. That's fine.
Yeah. Which is okay.
And it's also fascinating for me to think of a business coach of all people saying it's okay to be in survive mode over thrive, because I've worked with business coaches myself, and so often in that coaching space, it's like thrive, push yourself, take the risk, what's the worst that can happen kind of thing. And so many people are now saying it's okay. Like, yeah, it's okay to be in survival mode. I think the trick with that, though, is then being aware that you're consciously in that space.
Yes.
Kicking yourself in the butt when you need to get out of it.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. I mean, we kind of were in that survival place for a good 4 or 5 months. And I was like, okay, this is okay. This is fine. Like, we can do this. So then, it was back to my original plans for the year. I looked over them again and was like, okay, how can I get back on my original trajectory now and try and implement a few of those plans that I originally had this year? And do you know what? I think you're absolutely right in your evaluation of our risk of adversity. I think personally, I'm pretty, I would say, not pessimistic, but I'm very practical. Okay, what is the worst that can happen? And I try and think of the very worst case scenario of something. And if I can live with that, if I can live with that outcome, then I will do the thing. So I guess I'm quite risk tolerant, if you like. And I actually think that a lot of that stems back to having dyslexia from when I was younger, and the kind of tenacity that I had to have to turn up at class every day and just be continually told that I was getting stuff wrong, and just keep showing up and keep doing stuff, and for stuff to keep going wrong, and kind of just building that resilience. And I think out of all the careers that you could choose, resilience and pottery go hand in hand. They are, you need a huge amount of tenacity and resilience to make it in pottery, because so many things go wrong, and you just got to keep plugging away, keep going back in there. And what's the worst that can happen? Oh, the worst that can happen is this pot doesn't survive.
The entire kiln blows up.
There is that. You can burn down your house, but we try not to think about that one too often. As long as you've got insurance, it's fine.
Right. Oh gosh. But that is, I think this is the nitty gritty of actually, Instagram is lovely, but what does it actually mean to make a living from the stuff that we make? Like what it actually takes, and a little bit that maybe a little bit of that is resources and education and learning about how do you price your work for profit. Maybe you're not selling enough to get that much of a profit yet, but know that you're actually pricing for growth. Or
Exactly.
there's some tactical things, but there's also so much of the intangible, like what is your risk tolerance and how is that going to inform your business growth, and does that mean that you should maintain the side hustle? Do you just want to keep it as a side hustle all the time? And that's totally fine as well. And that's
Absolutely.
there's just so many different pieces of it.
Definitely. There's all sorts that you have to consider. There's something that I will talk about on the course. So, is talking about pricing your work like you love it, like you actually love your own work and you don't really want to sell it. Like some potters and some artists, in fact, they'll price their work like they don't even really value it themselves.
Yeah.
And it's like, how are you expecting other people to value it if you don't put a price tag on it that actually values your time and the skill and all those failures that you've had to go through to date to actually get to this point? And that is, there's mindset in there. There is cultural impact that as women, I think there's a huge implication of what the society that we've grown up in has told us, that we're worth less than men. There's the pay inequality. Yeah. Not to mention other factors like race and disability and all of those things that are going to influence the way you think about the work that you produce. And then there's the other side of it, which is making sure that if you are charging what your work is worth, then you need to make sure that your branding is up to scratch, that your photos and your website and your online presence, it matches that price point.
Yes.
Because if it doesn't, then your customers are going to look at it and go, huh? What?
Right.
If you shoot your work in a darkly lit room with your iPhone, and you put shaky, blurry images on your website, and your website is kind of, you threw it together in half an hour on one of these free website places, then people are going to balk at paying £35 for a mug. They are going to go, what? You're joking, right? But if your products are beautifully lit, if there's care taken about your product copy, the way that you talk about your work as though you've put so much love and care and time into this, then that shows and that comes across. And I think that a lot of people really struggle with either one of those things, whether it be the mindset or kind of the other side of it with the branding. And it just takes something like my wholesale course to point those things out and go, hey, make sure you're doing this. Because that's the key to, earning a living, is charging your worth and also representing your work as well as you can.
Well, and I don't know if you've experienced this, but I find that it's almost like business is a dirty word in the arts community. It's like, well, I make what I love and that's it. It's not a business. And like, no, it like you're trying to pay for your groceries and your mortgage and your healthcare, and you're like, this is a business. It doesn't have to be a used car salesman business, but like if we stopped making that a dirty word, if we stopped making profit a dirty word, how much healthier would so many people's lives be with that?
Absolutely. Hit the nail on the head there, I think, Rebecca, because there's so many people who are just like, oh, I just do it for the love of it. I don't really do it to make money. But there are people out there who actually rely on this to feed themselves, to feed their families, to keep a roof over their head. And in order for artists to still be in the world, they need to live. They need to afford to live
Right.
and to pay their rent and to buy healthcare in the US.
We're all just going to move anyways. But.
And if artists are to survive, which they absolutely must, artists are so important, especially in a time right now. We think that, like, I've struggled with this so much myself. My internal talk is oh, what does it really matter? What does pottery really matter in the grand scheme of things? You're not saving lives. You're not curing COVID. Like the guys like Pfizer and wherever are actually curing cancer. Like, what does art really matter? And actually, art matters because art changes culture. That is the way that we change things that are wrong with the world, wrong with society and wrong with humanity, is through culture and through art and through things that people share their lives with. And if we didn't have art, it would be the end of civilization.
I had so many other questions for you, but that's like mic drop, done, over.
Yeah.
Stop the recording. But it is true. It's true. I've been down that black hole myself. I mean, I've been in the wedding photography world for the past 10 years. What's more luxurious than that? That's not a need. In fact, in COVID times, weddings is part of the problem. I mean, so it's, oh gosh, I do. I really just, the fact that thinking of the power of art in the world, that the impact it can have on culture, especially the space that we find ourselves in, particularly in the US right now, like just that it really can. This has been my mission. This is part of why I've started this podcast, that I think that the more artists that we can empower to live viable lives, to get to that thriving, like, yes, okay, global pandemic, we all just have to survive, but to get back into that thriving mode and really actually build strong, reliable, sustainable lives that, what they can then do in their communities, in their world. I think that's how we can make the world a better place.
Absolutely, totally. And that's one of my aims for my business, is for me to be successful enough to channel some of my success back into the people who don't get those opportunities that I've had, the privileges that I have as a white person. I need to pass that on, and I should, and we all should. And that's what I'm aiming to do with my business, is to just give back a little and spread the, not the wealth, because that's the wrong word, but the,
because we don't have it yet.
yeah. Working on it.
Yeah.
Spread the love of this beautiful craft that we are so privileged to be part of, and just for other people to get access to that, I just think is, if I can facilitate that in any way, shape or form, then that just would be incredible. So I am working on a few things with my old university that I went to. Can't really share a lot about it yet because things are still very up in the air, but I am speaking to them about setting up a scholarship program, which probably will be a while before I can pay anyone's tuition fees, but I would wholeheartedly love to be able to pay for their studio fees. In the UK, if you are an art student or a pottery student, then you have studio fees that you have to pay every year, which kind of goes towards like the technical aspects of them running a pottery studio for the students, because obviously there's a lot of equipment in there, and there's a lot of tools that need to be bought, and there's a lot of materials that need to be bought. And for some people, the difference between having their studio fees paid for a year might be the difference between them taking a course or not. And that's one of my kind of goals for the end of this year, beginning of next, is to get that set up and for my business to contribute to that. And that would be specifically for Black students and students from underrepresented groups.
Wonderful. And that's, I think, the silver lining of COVID and this whole crazy year and having our businesses upended is it has given us all that pause to say, hold on a second. Was I growing the way I wanted to grow? Am I doing the things in the world I wanted to do? Like, this podcast wouldn't exist without COVID because I would have still been treading water in wedding season, just trying to get through editing. So,
Yeah.
well, that scholarship sounds incredible. I can't wait to hear more and anyway to help spreading the word on that when all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. Is there anything else that you've got going on that you're excited about, projects you're working on?
Yeah, so I have my online pottery club, which anyone can join. It's global because it's online. And I share monthly tutorials, pottery tutorials and projects and hints and tips and techniques there. And there's a lovely community over there, which is growing. And I'd love to see anyone who is a hobby potter or even just a professional potter who wants a little bit more community, then check it out. It's on patreon.com/Cara Leigh Ceramics. I also am writing a book, which will be released next August, so August 2021. And that is, working title is Pottery for Beginners. I had to think then.
It's a working title.
Pottery for Beginners, Curiosity and Clay, because that's all you really need to get into pottery is just curiosity and a bit of clay. And I also have my online course, which is the Smart Maker's Guide to Wholesale, which I will be running again in January of 2021. For anyone who's in the pottery world and would like to actually make a profit, then come and see me. I gotcha.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I will link to all of those in the show notes, and we're going to have you back on in August with the official title of the book when it's ready.
Thank you, Rebecca. You've been a sweetheart.
Thank you so much for your time. And where should people find you online just to keep up with all things Cara?
If you find me, I'm mostly hang out in Instagram. My handle is Cara Leigh Ceramics, Cara with a K. And you can also find me at my website, which is caraleigh-ceramics.com.
Perfect. All right, we'll wrap it with that.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. It's been so nice chatting to you.
That wraps up episode 102 of the Maker's Playbook. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean the world to me if you'd take a minute to subscribe and leave a review. It's my hope and dream to help as many makers out there build businesses that support the life of their dreams. And frankly, I can only do that with your help. Also, if you want to be sure to never miss a week of the Maker's Playbook, you can sign up for notifications at the link in the show notes. By doing so, you'll also get access to my monthly photography tips specifically for makers that I don't share anywhere else. Until next week, go get back to making your dreams a reality. Together, we've got this.